Всем привет, это проект Альфа.
Hello everybody, this is Project Alpha. My name is Nikolai Feldman. You are watching a War Diary with Alexey Arestovich. Hello, Alexey. Good evening. Alexey, I want to start our stream today with you directly because you became a newsmaker this week at least several times. First time, one organization announced you as the member of the registry of haters. And it's not an official, it's not a governmental organization, but still they are trying to put people who are, how should I formulate that, candidates to be announced as traitors. And perhaps you can comment on this a little bit for us and the audience. Oh, Nikolai, this is an old story, I think. When the victim goes too deep inside itself, it discovers a big sadist in there. And this is, remember the shark hate when one of the tourists got bitten from Russia, using Russian dead soldiers to write letters on the snow. Plus, it's full moon, and a lot of people are going mad, and a bunch of non-governmental organizations are now sitting on the dry spell because they're defunded from United States, and yeah, they're kind of spreading the waves of hate. So all these funny people who need hugs and perhaps a cheer, that's how I see them. Do you think that's their way to do what? To press on you to get the grant support back? Oh no, I think they're just drawing attention to their activities to show that, look, we are defending the ones whom Arestovich is attacking in his streams, and I can understand them. I knew a couple honest people from Zruch, from that organization where they added me. They were very young ladies who missed Komsomol organization, young communist organization in Soviet Union, and they had very big eyes, they believed everything, and they don't even know how much they look like those Komsomol activists, but they do. All right, Alexey, there was another accusation this week. You were accused of speculating on the deaths of Ukrainian soldiers, and a bunch of different representatives of patriotic circles in Ukraine were attacking you in the media this week, saying that achieving political goals by speculating on the deaths of military is a bad strategy. So from the military and our point of view of this stream, why do we need publications where you're criticizing how the soldiers of Ukrainian army died on the front? And there are people attacking you saying that, okay, maybe in the core message you're correct, but the form they don't like. Perhaps you can change the form. What would you say from the military point of view? Why do we need these publications criticizing the deaths of soldiers on the front? Well, first of all, Nikolai, one needs to learn how to read these publications. I'm describing what I see in my publications, and they describe what they want to see. The main thought in my essay was that if these soldiers would be properly trained and prepared for the fight, they would never be surrendered. They would most likely be able to win, to prevail over those who took them prisoners, because those guys who took them, they also were not gentlemen, right? And my accent in this post was mostly on the generals, on the Ukrainian generals. And those who were quoting, they were removing the last two paragraphs about generals, and they were quoting only the paragraphs when I was mentioning that they were standing on their knees before they were executed, when they were running on the knees to the place where they were executed. That's what happened. I'm just describing how it happened, how it occurred. I can give you another example from recent past, when Motorola, one of the bandits who were occupying Donetsk region, how he was feeding epaulets and pieces of military uniform to the defenders of airport, and how he executed those whom they captured, how much they tortured Ukrainian soldiers and then executed after. Are these the soldiers who are to blame? Oh, no, of course not, Alexei. Exactly. So the ones to blame would be, in the recent past, would be Givi and Motorola, those two bandits who essentially executed our soldiers. And in recent case, the ones who executed the surrendered group. But the larger blame is also on our generals who were in charge of preparing our soldiers, who allowed them to be captured. And the bigger question that I posted is, how do we conduct this war so that some very tired gentlemen from somewhere in Ural Mountains in Russia with significant signs of degradation on their faces allow themselves to kill Ukrainian soldiers in any fashion they like and however they like, torturing them before that. So many people wrote about this. Many military guys noticed that 15 of ours surrendered to 5 Russians. And they were not captured in heavy fighting. They were not fighting for 45 days in being surrounded completely. They did not run out of ammo. It's just 5 Russian soldiers attacked them from the flank, surprised them, and took them prisoners, which is very suboptimal and not normal. What does a typical Ukrainian patriot do? He doesn't want to think. No thinking. He doesn't want to read and go in the details of the situation. He cannot define the exact subject of that, what happened. But he wants to scream, he wants to bring attention, and he wants to point finger at somebody and call them a traitor. Usually it ends up with somebody who highlighted the problems with the army, because everybody's running now with screams, do not attack military, so they do attack the ones who criticize the military. But our military force is falling apart. And there are dozens of cases like that when 5 idiots from Russia pushed our soldiers from their positions. You mean, seriously? Like 100 cases? Yeah, not even one, maybe more. And something needs to be done with it. I do not feel comfortable when, even if they were super high culture people who captured our soldiers and executed them, but when it's some lumpen proletariat from Russia with significant signs of degradation capture our soldiers and execute them, I do not like it. I would actually prefer that our soldiers do not be executed. And even more than that, I would love them to not surrender. And even more than that, I would love them to not surrender when the ratio is 15-5 in their favor. And I do not have qualms with the soldiers themselves. I have issues with the ones who trained them, who made this situation possible, because it's unpractical to expect from everybody that he'll jump like Komsomol activist on the enemy guns and sacrifice his life. It's difficult. For a simple person, for a usual citizen, it's super difficult. To go to the war is difficult. To die is even more difficult. But this is the phenomenon that victims most often do fulfill all wishes of the executors. You remember the Chechen wars when Chechen fighters were killing Russian soldiers in Chechnya. Very often they followed all the instructions and even took the right positions, or the positions that were comfortable for the executor to finish them off. And one famous video when they're trying to cover the neck, but that's all resistance really that they could provide. You cannot expect serious resistance from every citizen. Not everybody is Matseyevsky, who could look executors in the eyes. But you can prepare pretty much everybody who goes to the front that when there are 15 of them, they can defend their position and they can prevail over 5 who are attacking them. That's why I have no questions to the soldiers who surrendered, who were executed. But I have a lot of questions to those who misused them, who mistrained them, and who misused them on the front in violation of army code. All right, Alexey. So about the generals and battalion and brigade commanders who were involved in this situation. Also, in your post, you did mention that when you're appealing to the patriotic audience of Ukraine, you mentioned that they do appeal to not attack the generality of Ukraine. So here I want to present an example from our friend, your friend, David Gendelman, who was giving an interview to Ukrainian Radio Freedom. He said that about responsibility of the generals on the Kharkov front. He's saying that he did not want to comment on Ukrainian politics, but he suggested that for military mistakes, neither military nor civilian court will court-martial you. If you made intentionally wrong decision, yes, you will be punished. But if you made an honest mistake, there is no court martial. You will be resigned, but there will be no punishment otherwise. So I think, Alexei, it's impossible in our situation. It's impossible for generals to control all 170 brigades on every micro part of the front from the center. And it ends up being pretty difficult to understand whether there was any bad or malintent in the commander of this detachment, general or brigade commander. No, it's not so difficult, Nikolai, to determine that. The military judicial system, unfortunately, in Ukraine was finished off in 2019. It was attacked during the whole 20s, but in 2019 it died. But professional military expertise of that judicial commission can actually give a pretty precise verdict. And you also need to consider that when making a decision, usually they do not have all the data and they have to make a decision quickly. Sometimes they do not know that there are 3 tank detachments coming to his left flank. And the intel did not notice and have failed to investigate that and to deliver this information to him. And he is not an almighty, so he might not have known it. This is not a crime against his service. In this case, erroneous order, mistakes in battle, they're inevitable. As they're saying, a surgeon has a cemetery behind him while he trains. A military general has 10 cemeteries behind his back while he trains. It's hard to accept, but you need to understand that officers and generals, they learn on the deaths of your relatives and your deaths. That's the profession. That's how you train as you go. But what can they be court-martialed for? If the commission determined malpractice or malintent. For example, incongruous training, incongruous system of preparation for the soldiers to the battle before they were sent to the front. And there is a simple fact here. Putin has 5 commanding generals of the armies and 60 commanders up to the level of division commander. Minister of Defense is decapitated. Shoigu, his old friend, has been removed from managing this department. And despite the quality of their infantry, who fell dramatically from the beginning of their invasion to now, Russian army is fighting better than they did before. In Ukraine, it's the opposite. Everybody is running around and screaming that army is holy and the soldiers are fantastic, but we are fighting worse now than we were at the beginning. My question is, does anyone want to consider the nature of these things happening? Well, Alexey, when I brainstorm it, I very often see one of the main culprits in absence of division and corps relationship in our military. Well, right, Nikolai, this is only a part of an issue. This was the thing that broke the back of our armed forces when they started saying that they transferred us to the NATO model, when they're just brigades and lower level groups there. There is no NATO brigade systems in the United States. They do have divisions. In France they have divisions. In Turkey they have divisions. So there are different higher level structures in the armies of the world, in the better armies of the world. We unfortunately do not have them. And David Gendelman also demystified another element that is popular with some people, that supposedly Israeli soldiers are told to surrender when they're facing a risky situation and they're told to tell everything. And, when these situations happen, I've seen a lot of notes online and social media from people, including the ones who wear military uniform in their avatars. And one of the popular opinions was, you don't understand what being prisoner of war is. If you surrendered, you need to answer all the questions, and you need to be responsive to everything they ask. Well, David just demystified that in his interview, because in Israeli army, and including many other armies in the world, if you surrender voluntarily, this is punishable by severe terms in prison. One thing, if you were captured with your pants down and no rifle, when you were forced and overpowered or somehow could not resist. Otherwise, you do not surrender. And by the way, when you do surrender, when you're captured, you only have to tell your name, number, right, and maybe detachment number, and that's it, and the name of your commander. In the Israeli army, by the way, there were a lot of cases when Israeli soldiers died in Syrian and Egypt captivity after being tortured and did not deliver any information. Yet there was one significant case there when one fella gave up all the information and surrendered all information and harmed Israel for years to come after that. But he was deceived. They captured him and they gave him a fake newspaper that supposedly was telling that Israel lost the war. And he unfortunately had a super memory, so he remembered everything that he read, and he had relation with secret information on the front in the military. So he was basically captured on one day, and he was presented as if Israel during the war has lost, and asked him to give all the data that he knew for a book supposedly that was being written, and he did. He spilled everything that he knew, and he ended up serving some time in prison. Not a big term, probably like 4 or 5 years, but after that he was released. And even that person who was deceived, he still served time in prison. So all these fairy tales that you have to surrender, that you have to tell everything, no, it's not so. Here's an example from Israel army that I just brought up. And of course, war is a difficult thing. Different things happen. But voluntary surrender is a military crime. All right, Alexey, in the 3rd Storm Brigade, they reacted to that video of execution of Ukrainian prisoners. According to Maxim Zhorin, it's becoming, sadly, quite a usual event on this front. There are no even statements from Red Cross, United Nations, or any other international organization, or any warm words of support from them to Ukraine. Once again, I posed the question, why do we need these international organizations if they're utterly useless? So I want to follow his questions here, Alexey. With Trump coming to power in the United States and a significant number of attacks on the United Nations from the United States and Red Cross, do you think anything will happen to them? I don't know, Nikolai. United Nations probably still has some influence, but World Health Organization, United States withdrew from that after COVID and other tensions. I do hope that the world will change ultimately, and all these grant recipients, international orgs that exist on some monetary givings from major contributors and ambassadorial covers that allows them to teach people how to live in different countries as if they are second in command after Christ. That's why, Red Cross, with all my respect to the past of this org, they did not do much to our prisoners of war, this war. They did some for civilians, but they did nothing for military prisoners. And they continue evading trying to help military prisoners of war here. If one asks what have they done for civilians, they have done some. We can talk about specificity, but again, it would be good to hear something from the heads of this organization, why they're not commenting on this situation. Another factor here is that execution of prisoners of war is not so much a Red Cross purview, but International Criminal Court likely should pay attention to it. But in the current world, Trump government also threatening criminal sanctions against this court after they attacked Israeli generals in their statements. So if we were smart, actually thinking it through, Russia should be the first country to punish those who killed prisoners of war, because this is a hard crime against any army code in any country that has a centralized organized military force. And ideally it needs to be punished and prosecuted with the most severe terms. If we were to bring an example, we can bring up the war in Afghanistan, right? There, Soviet Union fought with Mujahideen, who were not even a regular army. But over 300 of Soviet soldiers and officers for things like that were given significant jail terms. Alexey, you mean in Soviet Union? Yes, in Soviet Union. So even in Soviet Union, these events were punishable. These actions were punishable. Right. If that became known, that some officer or soldier executed prisoners of war, they were prosecuted. So what was the logic, Alexey, for the prosecution? Well, the soldier who does that is essentially committing an out-of-judicial system court-martial or execution that is non-judicial execution. So this is a significant crime. And Soviet Union did punish its servicemen for these violations. Soviet Union had a lot more weight in the world than today Russia, and they could have neglected these violations. But they understood that it's important to punish that. Because there were cases when Mujahideen were captured on the battlefront and then they were executed later. When these cases came to light, whoever done that went to jail. And Soviet Ministry of Justice, of Military Justice, understood that the moment you let your soldiers commit these crimes, your army will start crumbling. Now, they're saying that it's brotherly nations fighting, right, according to Putin's words. Now, if your soldiers execute brotherly people, that means that your soldiers just cruelly executed their brothers. I understand when it's war, when you fight and kill each other in trenches, but they executed unarmed prisoners of war. So, where's the message from Russia? There is none. Listen, on this backdrop, the appearance of video when Beletsky is talking in Russian language to Russian prisoners of war who are in captivity in Ukraine now, telling them about the details and the crimes they committed against Ukraine, that looks much better compared to what Russia is doing. I think Russia is losing the fight here for the title of who's the Nazi. Right, this is a propaganda action. It was filmed exactly for that, to counter what Russians are doing. But overall, the general rule is that the more serious the people are, the more educated they are, the less likely they will fall into this mindless execution of prisoners. And that's why we got so upset, because those two clowns from Russia who executed our fighters, they're not even on par of an average level of the 3rd Brigade. In the 3rd Brigade, we have some will to fight and very well motivated soldiers, and even the most mediocre of them is way more advanced than those two faces that conducted executions. All this torture is usually the purview of some scum on the front, who are usually not part of the front line, the ones who happen to be there on occasion, but they long to be involved more and they can't, and they're afraid to a degree. But yeah, those are the ones who would torture and kill somebody without arms. The real soldiers, they would actually give you water, give you a cigarette if they captured you, and they would probably give you medical aid before even helping themselves if they're wounded. You're a soldier, I'm a soldier. That used to be the code through the times immemorial. Well, Alexey, your message and your post about errors and mistakes that are permeating Ukraine military, that we need to pay attention and fix those things, those bullets, otherwise we will lose our army. And Valery Zaluzhny supported this post. Mariana Bezugla also supported you, and in her post she also supported your statement. Now, in your view, support from Valery Zaluzhny to you, why do you think Valery Fedorovich, when you are being hated so much, why did he make this step to support you? Because I think he feels himself rather comfortable in the conditions of working abroad in the UK for Ukraine. I don't know, Nikolai. Why did he do that? You should probably ask him, but he was never a coward. He was very strategic, very smart and calm and balanced. And we're friends since he was 19 and I was 18. So I'm 49, he's 51. How many years? Right, roughly 30 years. I would say that a person who would not support his friend because of some hate or something else, or some political prosecution that is being spun as political action, that person could not be an Iron General. If Valery would be afraid of these things, he would not have been commanding Iron General the way we knew him here. So that's my opinion, but you can ask him. Alexey, what's interesting here is that a big part of patriots in our civil society, when adding you to that registry of haters, they also put themselves in counterposition with support of Valery Zaluzhny, who is supporting you. How do you think they explain that to them, to themselves? How does that match in their minds? Nikolai, I don't think they think about it. It's too difficult to connect two things in their mind for them. It's philosophy. Philosophy is a science about subjects existing in this world and how they're connected, right? So when you want to see how people think, then you need to see how people take objects and subjects and how they connect things together. These people attacking me now, they don't really connect anything. And some of them making point and bringing, well, wait, Zaluzhny liked him. So then they have two explanations, that Zaluzhny is also a traitor, or that he has a very poor taste in people. So that any scoundrel can get close to Zaluzhny and ask him to take a picture, and that's what satisfies them. Yeah, I think you're very rational in this. What about Mariana Bezugla? With all her support to you in that statement, she still mentioned a couple of things that she does not support Alexei leaving Ukraine, but she agrees with a lot of statements that you make. And of course, there are no black and white things. So probably, obviously, she's not in agreement with you being in the register of haters. And the second, what she said is that in everything that you write, everything is correct. The only drawback is that Russian language, that you're delivering your data, your information in Russian language. So this post, her post, is about you commenting on the Ukrainian childhood diseases. And that post of having to speak Ukrainian, isn't it also a childish disease? Well, she doesn't see it this way. How do you explain, Alexei, her support to you? Well, she's a very young lady. She is representative of a different generation, very patriotic. She is brought up on the slogans that everything that has Russian in it is bad, super bad. So that's native part of her worldview. We can argue about that, or we can concentrate on more important things. For example, appeals to make sure that political leadership actually starts paying attention to the army as real adults, as I'm trying to conjure their attention on this topic. I'm glad that I managed to gather positive reaction from Valery Zaluzhny and from Mariana on my post, because Mariana was and still is attacking Valery Zaluzhny, and I don't think he's specifically happy about her attacks. I don't know for a fact, but I don't think that pleases him. So I think getting support from two people who are in public conflict, that means that the thesis I'm posting there, they're close to a lot of people in Ukraine. And I'm not in agreement about a lot of things with Mariana, but we agree on the major things, that army is not being paid enough attention. While the army is the only thing that stands between the worldview where we are and where we are not. That's why everything we have should be spent on the army. However, our military political leaders, they are not Bismarcks, they are not Napoleons, but even in these situations, you have some cadre who are better, who are worse. Army is a super prioritized organization, so we need to spend the best. We need to send the best commanders. We need to solve all problems of the army in a special mode. Any requests need to be attempted to be fulfilled. Our leadership, unfortunately, manages army as if we're living in peace times. And if you say no, then look at the public conflict in the Ministry of Defense between the Soros grant recipients and Minister Umerov. They're attacking each other and they're figuring out who's right, who's wrong. But there is a simple number of federal defense contract that was only fulfilled by 45% in 2024. That means all of our fighting soldiers got only about half of what they should have gotten from us, even though they're actively fighting a hot phase of the war. There are no arguments to justify that. These arguments are just impossible. The army that is fighting for the third year should be getting 120% of what they need, or at least 100. 45, this is a very bad parameter, even for the peace times when nobody is attacking you. And in this case, is a catastrophe. Plus, there is a public conflict that significantly drops Ukrainian prestige in the military sphere, where we had some prestige. It demoralizes society and other branches of power. Where's the decision of political leadership to address it? Some practical decision, not about overcoming the conflict, this is a secondary issue, but just about making sure that we fulfill the military order, that we punish the ones who failed to deliver, and what actions are we taking to make sure that in 2025 we fulfill it by 100%. Unfortunately, we do not see that. Perhaps there are some actions, but there is no strategic communication with people that should have explained our citizens what's happening and how it is being addressed. And these actions are missing, or they are not complete. This is very simple, and that's what Mariana is talking about. Zaluzhny, because of his specific position, ambassador, cannot afford himself to criticize the leadership. He has certain duties and he has some ethics. I'm sure he's grinding his teeth and he's really willing to say something, but I'm a private person. I can say. Mariana is a people's deputy. She can speak up. Other deputies could also, other congressmen and women could have spoken up. But what did they do? Instead of supporting her, they are, on the key matters at least, they are chanting together with posters to support poor generals who are being attacked by Mariana and society at large. People, if we do not address our army as the only thing that stands between us and the future where we do not exist, it doesn't imply that you have to fall on your knees in front of every soldier. It implies that you need to be objective. You need to understand what the army needs, how much are we fulfilling these needs for, and make weighted decisions, precise decisions about supporting, punishing, rewarding, and doing other activities related to army's actions on the front, or support thereof. Unfortunately, in Ukraine, we do not have proper systems of punishments and rewards. Same with punishments. We do not specifically punish those who make malintent mistakes on the front. And I'm talking about a principle here. We, as usually, replace the principle with situational sympathies or political hype. Now everybody is running with the names of Galushkin and some others. Maybe Galushkin is a brilliant fellow. But when people are saying no attacks on the military, guys, military industry is also a public institution that needs to fulfill their tasks. Army, military-industrial complex, when they fail to deliver the results, there has to be an investigation. And you don't need to be afraid. Perhaps it'll justify that everybody honestly acted and, just happened like this. Like in a famous historic anecdote about Napoleon, when one time he was attacking the general who gave up a key fortification, and he started yelling at him and screaming, "Give me at least one reason why you surrendered the fortification." And the general says, "Your Majesty, there were 18 reasons. First reason, I ran out of powder." At this moment, Napoleon said, "Enough. Just that reason is enough. You can keep 17 to yourself." And that's all the investigation, in brief. Nobody did anything with the general. He continued to command his troops. That's why this is how little kids treat things. Do not attack generals. The soldier is always right. Army is a holy cow. This is for the kids. Little kids are super sympathetic creatures. Super lovable. I love them all. But there is one deficiency in them. They cannot survive on their own. Now, a question. Do you want a right to realize your deficiencies and complexes? Or do you want to make sure that Ukraine survives? You need to make that decision. Because you can roll in feather and tar and scream that you're a victim right now. Or you can focus on working to make sure that Ukraine lives and you all survive. What do you want? It's a simple question. What do you want, guys? And you know the answer that majority will give us? I know. We want tar and feathers. Right, Alexey, and we won the borders of 1991. Right. They consider it to be their holy right to be a victim. Well, listen, Alexei, in any case, you can do a different way. You can create a parliament commission, you can create open or closed listenings, you can call on all the generals whom you want to talk to, Sodal, Galushink, anybody, and ask them, because people are talking. That case with Budanov that we probably will talk about later today. Right, Nikolai, this is how adults do. Adults try to create a precedence network. They try to figure out cause and effect and relations thereof. Sun Tzu, a famous military theoretician who was the first to put his works on paper, he was saying, and later he was quoted by most other military strategists, the system is defined by how rewards and punishments are given in it. This is the most core element. You put the goal and vectors. Now, those who hold upon your vector, perhaps they don't understand details, but they uphold the vector and they deserve a reward. Very often people were laughing at the medals for 10 years of perfect service or 20 years of perfect service. This is not exactly a funny thing, how some people might think. I want to say 10 years of perfect service actually cost a lot, especially if this position is not a battlefront and there's no war happening at the time. The way and stuff military specialists have to do during those 10 years could probably be enough for a civilian for twice the time that long in terms of amounts of work. And second, it's not only the vector that people are upholding, even though that daily work matters a lot, but also if they make significant actions along the way to support this vector, then they get rewarded for these actions. You know, when Stalin in the Second World War, when they recreated, updated the system of their rewards, they had a very detailed system of what is given for what achievement. I don't remember all the details about the Order of Great Patriotic War of the Second. Great was given for one destroyed tank in battle. For 2 tanks, he got the first order. My grandfather, on Battle of Kursk, destroyed 1 tank and damaged the second. There was a battle where million-size armies were fighting. There was a huge fight. And Commission did investigate and did determine that 1 tank was destroyed and the other was just damaged. He was on a very good terms with all of his superiors, and he was in the field intel, but still, after all the investigation, they got only the 2nd degree order. He had his commander trying to work to make sure he gets the 1st order, but no, Commission determined that he destroyed only 1. The 2nd tank was not destroyed. Each reward, each medal, each order had a specific list of actions that led to obtaining this order. It was very crystal clear. And for example, there were some really rare orders in Soviet Union. Kutuzov and Bogdan Khmelnytsky was the only order with inscription in Ukrainian that was given only to a certain type of military specialty on a certain level. For example, in operative actions or for certain actions won as the general. We unfortunately do not have that detailed list of orders in Ukraine. Our lineup of orders and rewards is very small. And I told them at the beginning of this war, you need to expand it, because if you continue breeding heroes of Ukraine, you'll just devaluate this title. We got some Iron Crosses and some other things, but we still do not have medals. And unfortunately, we do not have the big selection of rewards. And it's not too clear what to reward people for. They try to replace it with monetary rewards. Definitely, that's a good support, but how it is given, that's another story. And you don't have enough money to reward everybody in this style for a big war. And a poor country like Ukraine fighting such huge war cannot afford so much expenses on this. Plus, it will depend on providing a certain proof about destruction of enemy equipment. And frankly, destroying enemy's equipment, this is their job. I would still err on the side of us needing to expand the list of rewards and orders and medals. In old times, in Soviet Union, they had lifelong pensions based on what it was given for, especially if it's post-mortem. That if the dad died and his children need to understand what happened. Or in his widow, if, for example, she's only, 25 years old, she needs to understand why that happened and that society remembers him and honors him and rewards the family. This is not a small thing that a person can do. This is probably the biggest thing the person can do, to sacrifice his life for the country. And then we need to make sure that we have a normal commission that looks into all the details and understands, okay, here we can provide some rewards and some support to the families. Perhaps we do not have money to cut down on utilities payments, but perhaps the child can go to a high-ranking university when his or her time comes with the federal support. So this is where we need to understand what can we do, what can we not do, but it needs review, it needs attention. This is what smart people would be doing. Smart people, when they face an obstacle, they first evaluate it, different angles, different expertise, and then look for a decision, look for a solution to either overcome it or to make it serve your purposes, your goals. Kids can run around with slogans and say, we don't like it, this should not be so. Kids are fantastic creatures, they're beautiful, but they cannot survive on their own. And kids with victim mentality, they doubly so cannot survive. When our Ukrainian Facebook is telling us, community is telling us that surrendering is okay, this country is done for. And this is exactly what half of Facebook was talking about. I was talking to some foreign military specialists from a very active and well-practicing army. They're joking and saying, you have only one man in public space, and even that man is Mariana Bezugla, because she is not afraid. She is very detailed, and they actually do look at her, follow her posts, and value her. And they're saying, we would love to have one Mariana like that fighting for our army, because she's bringing up the topics which are difficult. Even in this other army, they understand that. They're saying that it's difficult to bring up these topics. For them, they have to approach politicians. Politicians are a bit rusty bringing it up because there are a lot of other questions related to that. And in normal society, the war is over, and that's the day when army budgets are starting to get cut. And Mariana is doing all this political activity on her own. And she was not afraid to make a post that in a society where a country treats surrendering as a positive or tolerates it as normal, this society is doomed. When you're running around saying that it's okay to surrender, and God forbid with 3 exclamation signs, to attack anybody who did it, you guys are hanging yourself. You just put a noose on your neck and trying to strangle yourself. It's a good thing that you have Mariana and one more fellow online who are telling you that this is not a good strategy if you want to live. Do you want to live? Alexey, when you're writing, can you come back to your senses, idiots? If the army folds, it's an end to everything. I suspect Zaluzhny supports your position regardless of Mariana's support. He understands it too, that the army is actually on the brink of collapse, I guess. Is it so? I don't know if he thinks in these terms, but our president recently voiced a very interesting message. He said that on our front we have 250,000 men fighting. The total number of our army is almost 900,000 troops. Right, he said 850. So 250 of those are on the front. And there's a lot of Russian troops fighting against them, about 600,000 troops against them. And attention here, the first question that those who are grieving about the executed prisoners of war, how does it turn that out of 850,000 army, it's only 250,000 who are fighting on the front? And now let's do some estimates. There are some estimates that we have about 120,000 people who voluntarily left their detachment. One of the security services colonels, lieutenant colonels, recently made a statement in public that after adopting the law about waiving certain punishment for leaving your detachment without orders, a lot more people got up and left. So 120,000. We also have about 120 to 140,000 people with limited health capacities. They cannot fully get engaged in fighting. They may be chopping wood, be providing support, logistics, transport. And I'm voicing the numbers that were in the open media. I'm not opening any super secret stuff here. These, we also have about 150,000 of refusers. Those people who are still in the military, they did not leave their detachment, but they refuse to partake in active actions. So 120, 120, and even the third one, let's call 120, 360,000. A third more of those who are in the army are not fighting, but still calculated as part of the army. They're getting money, some of them, they're getting supplies, food, some of them carry rifles. Would you perhaps want to ask a few questions of this army? And I suggest you to ask a question. How come that out of 800,000, almost half of it is either deserting or refusing? A half. Why? Alexey, I also have a concern here that those people who are refusers, do you think they're calculated among these 850? Yes, Nikolai, they are still servicemen. They're just voluntarily left their detachment. And that's the real number. So 40%, 45% of our army is either deserting or refusing to fight. And you are telling stories to society that this army is brilliant and super capable. Do you perhaps think that something is happening there, unsatisfactory in relation to your future perspectives? And colonels of this fighting army, the ones on the front, they're delighted with Mariana's statements. But the ones in the rear, the ones in the command, the ones in the political side, they're absolutely pissed by her posts. Yet from the front, I just had a message from a friend of mine who was telling me that when you read Mariana, you understand a lot more, that she understands a lot more than those people who are not fighting, than the rest of politicians and those military that are not in the trenches, who are telling our society that that's how we fight and we're going to win and do all that. So my question to our society is, do you want to live? It doesn't seem like you do. I cannot explain with anything else that trend of tolerating voluntary surrender or screams, do not punish anybody in the army, do not investigate, when you have 40+% of refusers and deserters. I do not have anything else to explain it with. You probably have a death wish. But there's a nuance. We do not want to die. There is a big part of Ukraine that does not want to die. And there is a lot of such Ukraine. There is a lot of Ukraine that do not want to get monuments dismantled that were placed in their places for private money raised by citizens, not federal money. So when they get dismantled, that's actually a crime. You're violating private property rights. But that Ukraine, with this opinion, almost has no voices. Very few. I'm one of them. And that's why these so-called patriotic forces who want to die, okay, God bless them, I would still fight for them. Some of them are very smart, they're just very deceived or deceiving in their concepts. But what about the rest of Ukraine? Those people who left Avdiivka to Pokrovsk, let's say. And now Pokrovsk is being surrendered or being taken. Then what? They have to flee to Zaporozhye. This army that we have in 3 months, regardless of what they're trying to fight and hold the front, given the amount of supplies and attention to their problems, they probably will be fighting for Zaporozhye and Dnieper in about 3 months. They'll be fighting for Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. They'll move further to the left. Where do people have to run from those areas? Or from Kharkov, if it'll still be bombed and attacked daily. Where to go? To Lvov? To the western Ukraine? So that they would be prosecuted for speaking Russian, speaking the wrong language? To those kindergartens where Grandma Farion, may God have mercy on her soul, was telling her grandchildren to attack kids who speak Russian? Who will be taking care of these people? Where are politicians who will take care of them? It's very simple. we have a part of Ukraine that is definitely having a death wish, that is creating this false trance, instead of asking the right questions of how did it happen that our guys got surrendered into this situation? Why did they surrender? What happened? Instead, they're looking at why were they forced to crawl on the knees and why somebody attacks this topic. It is sensitive, it shouldn't even be discussed. But the problem is not how it was done and how they were executed. I think the problem is how did we get to that 15 soldiers surrendered to 5? And if they were well prepared, we could have gotten normal soldiers out of them who would have put these 5 on their bayonets and would have not surrendered. The problem is not that they were on their knees and they were executed. The problem is that they were not prepared. So the 15 would not surrender to 5. They were not trained, they were not supplied. Commander did not put an FPV over them, did not correct the mortar fire, did not send a support group, did not analyze the battle situation and its possible development, did not close the left flank, did not do a lot of other things. That these soldiers in the most comfortable conditions as it's possible to fight against the enemy. And this is the task of the commander, to put your troops in the better conditions than the enemy's, to put the enemy in the worst conditions for the fight. I would really be curious to discuss the matter with the company commander, with the platoon commander, with the battalion commander. I know this brigade, I know where it happened. I know real estimates of military officers, not that fluff that's running in the comments on Facebook, even if their avatar has a helmet and a rifle. But real military who are fighting on the front, they're just staying mum because it's not, they're busy otherwise. It's not their business to discuss things on Facebook as long as they serve. But they know, understand, and they give very different estimates to what happened. That's it. If you have a death wish, you're welcome to die. We don't want to. We will be posting questions in the way we want to post them to survive. Now, today our methods are limited because of the martial law in the country. People are almost completely devoid of different levers to affect the power, but we can talk. And this is not little. This is not puny. This is part of remnants of democracy we have. At least later we will say that we did not stay quiet. We did not stay mum when we saw this horrible treatment of our troops. Look, Nikolai, these idiots don't even get the message that overall, when people are upset that their soldiers were executed, this generally goes to the matter of not executing these soldiers in the future, right? They're supporting that their soldiers should not be executed, should not be captured in the future. This is a very simple consequence of this position. Do you know the difference between a lion and a dog? When somebody throws a stick at the dog jumps at a stick. When somebody throws a stick at the lion, he's looking at the one who threw the stick. I want our patriots to be lions, and yet they're not even jackals, maybe rats. And this is the tragedy. They're my political opponents, but I have sincere regret that this is the level of political opponents that I have to face. It's difficult to even get into discussion with them. I tried. I did call upon all of them. None of them showed up. And after that, you want to wipe your hand when you have to deal with them. And now, attention, if we have these patriots like that, what are our perspectives? End of hour 1.